of the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motions adopted by the committee on Thursday, September 18th, 2025 and Thursday, December 11th, 2025, the committee is resuming its study of the Canada Infrastructure Bank's financing of new vessels for British Columbia Ferry Services, Inc. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of witnesses and members. First, please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you're not speaking. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder, colleagues, that all comments should be addressed to the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience in this regard. Colleagues, I'd now like to welcome our witnesses for the first hour today. We have appearing before us the Honourable Gary Anandasangri, Minister of Public Security. Welcome to you, sir. As well as officials accompanying the Minister today from the Department of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness, we have Mr. Richard Bilodeau, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, National and Cybersecurity Branch. Welcome. And from the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, Vanessa Lloyd, Deputy Director. Welcome to all three of you. Minister, we will get right into it because I know that we're eager to ask you questions. And with that, it's my pleasure to turn the floor over to you for 5-minute opening remarks.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief in my opening remarks. I'll leave enough time for questions. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we're meeting on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin people. Merci, Monsieur le Président, et membres de comité.
Thank you, members of the committee, for inviting me here today.
Colombians, especially in coastal communities, rely on ferries as modes of transportation for connection to the mainland. The decision by BC Ferries last year to procure its new ferries offshore was a decision made by the province after conducting their own due diligences to accommodate growing demand and need for service. The committee is understandably concerned about the implications of this deal on national security. While Public Safety Canada does have authority to conduct security reviews of foreign direct investments under the Investment Canada Act, it does not review procurement decisions at the provincial level, such as this one. Therefore, we would not have had the authority to conduct a national security review in this case. Only after outreach from Transport Canada did public safety officials engage with BC Ferries. BC Ferries had already made their procurement decision. Notre gouvernement entreprend actuellement plusieurs initiatives.
Our government is undertaking a number of initiatives to strengthen our economic and national security and sovereignty. This in the face of ever-changing and ever-increasing threats.
Continually examine how to protect and promote Canada's economic security. This includes expanding both domestic and international collaboration, as well as identifying key areas of engagement and focus. Maintaining and bolstering economic security is crucial to our growth and our sovereignty. This requires a whole-of-government approach across all levels of government, industry, Indigenous communities, and partners, academia, and international allies. Mr. Chair, once again, thank you for the invitation to appear at this committee. I welcome your questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Minister. We'll begin our line of questioning today with Mr. Albas. Mr. Albas, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister and officials, for the work you do for our country. Minister, is China your government's new strategic ally, or is China, as Canadian security agencies have repeatedly stated, the most sophisticated and active state cybersecurity threat to Canada today? It cannot be both, sir.
I believe the Prime Minister has said that we want to meet our trading partners where they're at, not where we would want them to be. With respect to the work of the Prime Minister, as you're aware, we're facing significant difficulties with our closest and best trading partner, the United States. We have embarked on an international effort to expand trade relations, including with China. And I would suggest that the work that the Prime Minister has done, including his upcoming visit to India, Australia, and Japan, is part of this broader narrative to expand our trade by 50% over the coming years, one that will ensure that our both economic security and jobs will be protected in Canada while we're going through some trade difficulties with our southern border.
Well, first of all, that makes no sense because we're talking about jobs being skipped over here in Canada for a Chinese hybrid shipyard. But, Minister, it sounds like you're saying, and again, I believe in being clear-eyed about these things, it sounds like you're saying national security interests should be subordinate to trade interests. Is that the case?
I believe you can do both. And what we've undertaken with China, and I can ask my officials to expand, is that we do have an agreement that speaks to issues around safety and security. We have an MOU that was signed, as you're aware, when the Prime Minister was in China last month. However, we're also working towards greater economic engagement. Similarly, we're doing that with India and many other countries. So we are, I believe that we are able to do both.
Minister,
and in fact, the moment calls us for us to do both.
You did mention officials, and I will say, in this unclassified document that this committee has received from Transport Canada, officials have said, Transport Canada warned of media reports of surveillance technology embedded in equipment, ports, cranes, and drones, raising concerns about hidden sensors and data harvesting technologies in foreign manufactured transportation assets. Given this, what specific national security assessment has public safety conducted to rule out embedded surveillance hardware or software in these ferries being built in China?
So as I indicated in my opening remarks, that there was no security assessment. This was outside of the scope of the work that our national security apparatus do. This was a procurement that was undertaken by BC Ferries in the province of British Columbia. And it is very much outside the scope of the work that we undertake.
Well, Minister, I got to say, the fact that no security review has been done is unfathomable to me. Transport Canada states plainly that Canada does not have comprehensive legislation to manage the risks identified on this file, and that existing oversight focuses only on performance and safety rather than mitigation of national security concerns. Example given, unauthorized data access or surveillance. Why would public safety permit foreign-built ferries to be imported before the government closes this legislative gap? What do you have to say, sir?
Mr. Albas, I don't want to demean your understanding of Canadian federalism, but let me take this moment to say that we are the federal government. This particular procurement was undertaken by the province, as you're aware, province of British Columbia. They have every authority to do that. They have their own laws and guidelines that they follow, and it is very much in that vein that this particular procurement was undertaken. So it does...
Security review by Public Safety Canada. Transport Canada says that we have legislative gaps that do not cover this kind of stuff. Minister, Transport Canada also warns that vessels built in China will have access to Canadian waterways and could gather information related to critical underwater infrastructure, as well as critical North American supply routes. Minister, what is public safety's threat assessment regarding foreign-built ferries mapping, scanning, or otherwise collecting intelligence on underwater cables or other important data infrastructure?
What I can say is that every vehicle, every vessel that comes here will have to meet Canadian standards.
But there's no review. You've said there's no review, sir.
Well, there are two different things, right?
There's a safety review by Transport Canada.
One is the safety, the safeguards that are in place, and in this particular case, the BC government procured these vessels.
So the BC government has the right to put our national security and the Canadians' own national security at risk. Is that what you're saying, sir?
What I'm saying is that they have the prerogative to undertake.
They have the prerogative.
They have the prerogative to undertake procurement according to their laws, according to their rules, and in this case, that is exactly what has happened. But what I can say is that vehicles, whether it be EV vehicles or those vessels that are being procured, still need to be in line with Canadian standards.
Mr. Chair, I'm just going to take really a quick second here. So these vessels effectively have a 25% tariff. Your department is, CBSA, is I should say, the agency is supposed to collect those tariffs unless there's a remission order. Does the government plan on giving these foreign-built vessels a pass and effectively not just locking out Canadian workers, but actually making them cheaper for BC Ferries to bring in at the expense of our industries. What is your answer, sir?
Well, as you're aware, CBSA is an independent agency. They're not represented here in the panel today. If you would like further information, I would be more than glad to get that for you.
Thank you very much,
listed
both.
in the,
Thank you,
on the
Mr.
Customs
Albas,
Tariff
and
Act,
thank you very
specifically
much,
with that response.
Minister. We'll now turn our attention to Mr. Greaves. Mr. Greaves, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to our witnesses. And Minister, thank you so much for joining us today, sir. As the Member of Parliament for Victoria, as you know, I represent constituents who rely on BC Ferries. This is critical infrastructure in our part of the country, necessary for daily life, for economic growth, for vitality, for all manner of services and connectivity throughout our province, and indeed the entire west coast of Canada. People in my community know firsthand that the aging of BC Ferries' fleet is creating real challenges and also is a drag on our economic productivity and the diversification of our economy on the West Coast. From our perspective, new ferries are necessary, and they really, to be honest, can't come quickly enough. In this vein, knowing as we do that the shipyard in China that has been selected by BC Ferries for the construction of these new vessels has also produced ferries that are in use by many of our allied countries, notably France and Denmark, as well as others. I'm wondering if we could just clarify the record and ask you a very direct question. Does Public Safety Canada have any reason to believe that this procurement of new vessels by BC Ferries poses a national security risk for this country?
Thank you for the question, and let me just comment at the outset on the need for increased ferry services in British Columbia. I've, tried to go to Victoria and Nanaimo from Vancouver on a number of occasions, and I've had difficulty sometimes attaining a ferry in a timely manner. Other modes of transportation, as you know, is weather dependent in many cases, and often we find ourselves washed out and not able to travel. So I do fully recognize the needs of your community, needs of British Columbians, as well as those in Victoria and Nanaimo and other major areas where these ferries will be utilized. Having said that, I think it's appropriate for our national security officials to answer the question vis-a-vis the vessel itself. So maybe we'll start with Ms. Lloyd and Mr. Belado.
Thank you very much for the question through the chair. I'll start by perhaps offering to reassure the committee members that the national security community writ large, including CSIS, takes the ongoing investigation, monitoring, and where appropriate mitigation of threats seriously every single day. As the Minister has said, in this case, the procurement of these vessels was not subject to a review. I think the committee would understand that given that there have been concerns raised by the former Minister of Transport that there could be national security concerns, that we are alert to that potential. And so I can explain to the committee what we do in those cases. We make sure that we are doing engagement to our stakeholders at the provincial and all levels of government, as well as to industry partners, and to make sure that going forward in the building and engagements under this contract, that those entities have the opportunity to engage, for example, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service to report any concerns that they have. I would also highlight, as the Minister mentioned, connected vehicles. These ferries are not connected vehicles. So some of the concerns that the committee might have as with respect to data sovereignty or other concerns around EVs, to my current understanding, don't apply in this case, although I would defer to Transport Canada to speak specifically to the technology that is in these particular ferries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And the one thing I will add, just in terms of the toolkit, one of the bills that's before Parliament and committee right now is Bill C-8 that contains some provisions in Part 2 that would address critical cyber systems in federally regulated sectors, transport being one of them, and that will increase the protections that are in place for that and other sectors as well, such as the energy sector, telecommunications, and the financial sector. So those important tools are being studied right now and would be relevant in the transportation sector.
Thank you very much for those responses, Minister, and to the officials with you today. Minister, you stated in your opening remarks that Public Safety Canada does not review provincial procurement decisions. I'm wondering if you could tell us, from the perspective of your department and the public servants who work in service of our country, would it be feasible, would it be legal for the federal government to intrude on provincial jurisdiction by having that kind of involvement in what are ultimately, under our federal system, provincial decision-making?
Right now, the mandate to undertake such reviews is within the Investment Canada Act, and that is an area where we routinely review the circumstances of each transaction, and we comment on it. It is essentially led by Industry Canada, but public safety has a very important role. If there are security concerns, we can extend the time of those reviews, and we can come back with a wholesome response that will enable the government to make a decision accordingly, to block a transaction, to ask for wind down of an entity, a range of options that's available, including mitigation, which happens in many cases where we try to mitigate any impacts on national security if there are some reasons to believe that there could be some opening. So we attempt to mitigate cases where we can.
Okay. Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you, Mr. Greaves. Prochainement, nous avons Mr. Barsalou-Duval.
Mr. Barsalou-Duval, 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here. A point of clarification. You explained that there was no security review for the contract granted for the BC Ferries. For BC Ferries, BC Ferries is a British Columbian authority, but the Infrastructure Bank is a federal institution. About $1 billion were granted, so there's no oversight, no national security oversight that's made when it comes to investing in that kind of situation.
As I indicated, so merci pour la question, Monsieur.
Thank you for the question.
Let me just say that the Investment Canada Act is the vehicle by which we can review transactions that are of concern. They're mandated, they're very strict in scope, and it is a referral that we get from Industry Canada. What in this situation, the Infrastructure Bank is an arm's length entity of the government. There's no direct link between the Infrastructure Bank and Canadian review of procurement. It is there in order to leverage and allow jurisdictions such as provinces and territories as well as municipalities to leverage their dollars.
Donc vous confirmez un peu ce que...
So you're confirming what I said. All investment decisions made by the Canada Infrastructure Bank does not need a security review undertaken by your department, even if it is decided that an investment should be made with Iran or North Korea, so the CIB could invest in North Korea. I find that rather strange, given that this is federal money that was invested in the program. It's a federal entity. The former CIB, head of the CIB, is close to the Prime Minister. We know that sometimes there is a bit of too much friendliness between former CIB heads and the Prime Minister.
With respect to countries like Korea and North Korea and China, they're not countries that we do business with. We don't have diplomatic relations with them. They're not necessarily part of our trading bloc, and there's no reliance on trade with either one of those countries. So those scenarios are frankly absurd.
Ouais,
but I would
je vous pose
suggest...
la question parce que...
I ask you this question because you said that there is no security review when the bank makes investments. So you're saying it won't happen, but hypothetically, nothing's stopping it from happening. And honestly, Minister, I don't think that we should be entering agreements with China blindly. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have any, but at the end of the day, I also find it concerning to learn that there is no oversight, security oversight, with arm's length Crown Corporation decisions. Don't you find that worrying?
So we go back to the procurement itself, which was undertaken by the province, and I'm going to use example of Quebec as illustrative. So if, for example, we undertake a review of a procurement that's undertaken by the province of Quebec or the government of Quebec, I would think that there would be a bit of an outrage. It is, we are different levels of government, and in this instance,
Mon intention, c'était pas que vous
My intention isn't for you to step on provincial toes, and you know that you're trying to provoke us by saying that, because of course I would never want to see federal institutions block an investment made by the government of Quebec, but here we're talking about the investments made by the CIB. We're not talking about BC investments. We're talking about the investment from the federal CIB. And so I don't see how you'd be able to say no, given the current circumstances. It seems that logically there should be some kind of oversight. I find that concerning. In any case, perhaps another question. At one point, was the fact that the CIB, was the fact that it was going to make an investment, was it raised with your office, or were you just unaware of it?
Well, CIB makes its decisions independently of government. They report through the government, but they are, in all means, they're independent. It's like the Business Development Bank of Canada, for example. They're
mais la transaction, à quel moment?
At what point were you made aware of the transaction? Did someone raise a red flag at one point, or did you learn it through the media, or did you learn it through this committee?
Well, let me just maybe ask Mr. Belledeau to answer that question.
So the department was made aware sometime towards the end of April, early May, that the BC Ferries was going to or had selected a Chinese. Oh, pardon, excusez-moi, je vais me changer en français.
So I'm going to switch to French. Sorry, it's automatic for me to speak English. But end of April, early May, we learned that the province of British Columbia had made a decision to purchase these ships. And in May, June, we were in communication with them. I can't say when the minister was made aware, but that's when the department itself was made aware. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Next, we'll go to Mr. Muys. Mr. Muys, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you. So, Minister, is this on? Okay, it's a new system. To me, it seems a bit of a cop-out to say this was a provincial procurement decision. I mean, obviously, these are not just hulls. These are floating IT systems with all sorts of capabilities. Is that not a matter of national security concern?
Look, essentially, this was a decision made by the government of British Columbia. They are able to make these decisions. This is when vehicles do come into Canada, vessels, they need to be in compliance with Canadian laws, and that is an expectation of anyone bringing transportation vehicles of sorts into Canada. There's regulations in Canada that dictates, range of issues, and that is what our regulatory process does. But in terms of a review from a security perspective, it's not something that is required or routine, and this, in my opinion, was somewhat of a routine exercise by the government of British Columbia.
This is a Chinese state-owned corporation. We know, there's been issues with Chinese foreign interference, not just politically, but economically. That didn't raise any alarm bells at Public Safety Canada.
Well, I would say that the matter came into I guess, the public domain sometime in late June. I took the office, I think, sometimes in mid-May. So I was made aware of it. It was after the fact the procurement was completed. And in any event, there was no mechanism for us to be able to undertake such a review. And it is, again, the prerogative of the government of British Columbia to be able to undertake a procurement of this sort.
There's no mechanism for Public Safety Canada to undertake a review in this circumstance. Okay, so if we accept that, and I don't think that we do, is there any effort to change the procedures? I mean, this is obviously something of concern. We're bringing this to your attention now. You've now been the minister for I guess 9 months. Is this something you're going to look at going forward?
Look, I look forward to the report of this committee, and I know you've been studying this for a while, so I look forward to recommendations from this committee, and we will respond to it accordingly.
So okay. So it's the province's fault. Now we'll wait for the committee. It's our responsibility. I mean, the former minister.
Sir, I would suggest that you're studying this for a reason, right? And if that reason is to have constructive, assistance in changing policy and changing laws, then that is the purpose. And I would, have to yield and respect this process. And as I said, I'm looking forward to recommendations that may stem from here.
So when the previous Minister of Transport on June 18th wrote to you, asking your department to have some level of review on this, you ignored that since June 18th now?
Well, I would say that we had no authority to undertake that review.
Okay. So matters of national security.
It's a post facto review. That is not something that we're able to do.
That's okay. So it's passing the buck again. This is a matter of national security, and we know we have a foreign. It's a company that's owned by a foreign government that there's certainly been questions about in the past, and there's no accountability, there's no responsibility, there's no, especially when the alarm bells have been raised by people that you sat at the cabinet table with for that period of time. Who was the Minister of Transport?
I'm here to answer your question, so I don't know if there's a question there.
Okay. So then other critical pieces of federal infrastructure. I mean, obviously there's going to be many, whether it's in the transport sector or other sectors, there's going to be a lot of investment into critical infrastructure. That's in the budget. Is there going to be a process where if, and again, this particular company or other companies that are state-run companies from China, is that going to be reviewed in any way? Like, I mean, I understand the Investment Canada Act, but I mean, what other responsibilities is there at national public security that you head that should be undertaken?
All the major projects that are going through the review process, there is a security component, and colleagues here can speak to that if you wish. I think we're out of time.
Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you, Mr. Muys. Next, we'll go to Ms. Nguyen. Ms. Nguyen, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, thank you for joining us today to have this important conversation on BC Ferries. As my colleague did note, several of our close NATO allies, including the Netherlands, Sweden, and France, have also engaged in offshore shipbuilding procurement projects with the same company that BC Ferries used to do their ferry procurement. Could you tell me a little bit about how public safety assesses potential risks associated with foreign-built vessels, especially when similar procurement decisions are being made by Canada's trusted security partners?
Great. Let me just ask Mr. Bilodeau to maybe shed some light into that.
Thank you very much, and maybe Ms. Lloyd will be able to supplement Chair on this. Obviously, exchanges with our allies is a key component of not just the intelligence community, but public safety as well, and understanding the landscape. My understanding is that part of the procurement process from BC Ferries was to understand the procurements in other jurisdictions. But we, without getting into specific details, obviously, of intelligence, we use information from all around the world to inform our decision making and our advice to government in terms of different risks, just generally speaking, not necessarily in this situation. And understanding those risks is a key component of our analysis, whether it's in the Investment Canada Act or, as the Minister highlighted, in supporting work that's undertaken by the Major Projects Office.
Thanks very much. And I wondered, Ms. Lloyd, if you could expand a little bit on whether or not, given your position at CSIS, if there are any concerns that you have identified with BC Ferries and this particular procurement.
I'm not sure if it's on there. Thank you through the chair. Thank you very much. What I perhaps will start with to say to the committee is that our underlying assessments of the risks have not changed. And I think the pragmatic and principled approach of this government means that national security and economic security are at the core of that approach. So as I mentioned earlier, we are constantly collecting intelligence relevant to economic security threats, including foreign interference or espionage or cyber, and constantly, as Mr. Bilodeau said, producing intelligence and information to inform the government. And our job at this point is to make sure that they are navigating those partnerships with that informed perspective. As it relates to these particular ferries, our role at this point, after the procurement decision has been taken, is to be available to our stakeholders, the province or BC Ferries, should they have concerns, and to make sure that they are equipped, as the member referenced, to understand the various risks in engaging with a state-owned enterprise in this particular context. So what that would look like is making sure that they are equipped with tools prior to traveling to a country, prior to engaging with different entities so they understand what foreign interference looks like, and be extra confident that they understand how to report to the national security agencies, CSIS, the RCMP, and the Canadian Cyber Centre, Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, any concerns in those engagements.
Thank you. That's really helpful context as I'm learning more about this, this part of the work. Minister, one of the things that's been really clear through the process of the study is that establishing the clarity around the roles and responsibility for each jurisdiction is important, especially around the role of procurement. And so to clarify, what I've learned is that BC Ferries operates independently from the federal government, meaning that there's no direct federal involvement when it comes to the procurement and the contracting of these ferries. And so tell me a little bit about what the role of the federal government and public safety do play in stepping in to support here.
So in areas, particularly when business investments are made, there are certain provisions in the that will require under the Investment Canada Act that will require a review. We routinely review. In fact, the first set of review is undertaken by the Industry Canada, and then from there it comes to us. So if there are security concerns, then we will be able to undertake the review. Oftentimes it is either we approve it or we have mitigation that is recommended, and then Industry Canada would write in some mitigation in the approval, or it will be denied, and certain times there may be a wind down of the operation. That may be sought by us.
Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you, Ms. Nguyen. Prochainement, nous avons Mr. Barsalou-Duval. À vous la parole, 2 minutes et demie.
Mr. Barsalou-Duval, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Minister, you talked about the fact that there are independent entities that make independent decisions, so there's no security review. Another example, Via Rail will have to decide who will build its next trains to replace its aging fleet. If it wants to do business with a Chinese or a Russian entity, it's their business. You have nothing to say about it?
What I will suggest is that we now have a Buy Canada mandate. This is something that was announced several weeks ago.
But that doesn't apply for replacing Via Rail's trains. That's what your government mentioned, and that's what was publicly broadcast in the media, unless you're telling us today that you have the intention to change things to make sure that the trains are actually built in Quebec or Canada, which would be great for us.
Well, if you'll allow me to continue, essentially we have a Buy Canada mandate across government, and we want to, at every opportunity, to be able to buy Canadian, especially when federal dollars, procurement dollars are at work. We want our economy to be built, Quebec and Canadian economy.
Je viens de vous dire que ça s'applique pas pour cet approvisionnement-là.
I've just said that based on your own criteria, it doesn't apply to this procurement. You haven't responded to the question. If Via Rail were to decide to buy trains from a potentially dangerous country, would you have a say in the matter?
Well, federal procurements are different, and maybe Mr. Bilodeau, if you can respond.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Effectivement, je pense qu'on a une situation qui est un peu différente.
Thank you. Indeed, we're in a bit of a unique situation because this would be a federal purchase, and our colleagues of the Department of Transport also have access to information from CSIS, for example. The context is slightly different. The work that Ms. Lloyden is doing with her team and with other intelligence services is to give intelligence and information to make enlightened decisions. It's much easier to support this kind of information in a federal purchase context. You don't want to apply that to the CIB? Thank you, Mr. Barsalou-Duval, and of your time.
Next, we have Mr. Gunn. Mr. Gunn, welcome to committee. The floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair. Minister, first question to you. Do you believe China's communist regime poses a security threat to Canada?
What I would say, Mr. Gunn, is that Canada is in a moment where we are expanding trade. We are, as I said earlier, as the Prime Minister has said, we will meet the countries where they're at, not where we want them to be. With respect to China,
are they a security threat or no?
With respect to China, we do have an MOU that speaks to to address the issues around safety and security in both countries.
Thank you, Minister. I'll be a bit more direct. Do you have evidence that the communist regime in Beijing has previously targeted Canadian institutions or strategic assets with cyber attacks and other forms of espionage?
Yes, there have been reports of that in the past. Some of them have been documented.
I mean, you're the Minister of Public Safety. Do you have evidence?
There's definitely documented evidence of that, yes.
Do you have evidence that the communist regime in Beijing has targeted the House of Commons and the private information of parliamentarians?
What I will say is that for the purpose of this particular transaction, this was a procurement that was undertaken by the province of British Columbia.
So you don't deny that then?
Well, look, there's been a number of incidents. I'm not sure we're here to litigate every one of those. What I would say is that there is a need right now for Canada to ensure that we are able to go clear-eyed and ensure that we have a track that deals with safety and security. Then that is something that we're doing.
Minister, I appreciate your openness and honesty. I just want to make sure we're on the record that, because I think it's a position that you can hold, that you think it's reasonable to use taxpayer money to help subsidize the procurement of critically important transportation infrastructure from a regime currently engaged in espionage and other cyber crimes against Canada. You think that is reasonable? So that's what's happening.
So what I would say is that, as I said a number of times, the procurement was undertaken by the government of British Columbia, and this is
right. But is taxpayer money? It was federal taxpayer.
This is within their purview. This is the Canada Infrastructure Bank, although was a funder in this.
Do you regret that taxpayer money was used to bankroll the purchase?
The procurement itself was undertaken by British Columbia.
Do you regret that federal tax money was used to help subsidize, to bankroll the purchase? Through the infrastructure bank?
What I would suggest is the government of British Columbia made a decision on this procurement. The funding did go from the Canada Infrastructure Bank. However, the decision itself is on the government of British Columbia.
Okay, fair enough. Are you concerned as the Minister of Public Safety that we are subsidizing the shipbuilding infrastructure of an adversarial nation?
What I would say, Mr. Gunn, is that our desire, Prime Minister's desire, and we made it very clear as a government, is that we want procurement to be done in Canada. We want to have Canadian companies who can compete for these very important infrastructure purchases, and that is precisely what we're doing with our defense infrastructure.
Would you have preferred if those ships were built here in Canada?
Absolutely. I would say
why then did we bankroll?
Well,
why did we bankroll?
If I may, I would say that every Canadian would say that we would prefer to have our infrastructure dollars be spent in Canada. That is not always the reality. So what I would suggest is, in this particular case, the procurement was done by the government of British Columbia. I'm going to give them the benefit to say that it was done in an open, transparent, and fair manner, and they have chosen this particular vendor.
Just so we're on the same page, because this is an important procurement. Obviously, there's public safety concerns, security concerns for Canadians. Are we on the same page that China is a communist country?
Well, I mean, I think it's factually yes.
Okay, that's perfect. Do you agree that President Xi is a dictator?
What I would suggest is that we can go around the world and put tags on individual leaders.
We certainly can.
That is not what I'm here to do. What I'm here to advise this committee is that the process by which we undertake these procurements in this particular case was by the government of British Columbia.
Have you done a security review?
We talked about it before you came here, Mr. Gunn. So I
just want to get it on record.
You may want to review the transcript. Because,
I found it hard to believe. I was told that we hadn't done it, but is that true?
Well, I can ask Mr. Bilodeau to answer that question. We've already answered that, but if you want this to be repeated, of course, we can do that.
Thank you, Chair. There was no security review done of the actual BC, the ferries that BC purchased. When we got involved in late April, early May, the decision to purchase the ferries had already been made.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gunn, and merci, Mr. Bilodeau. Next, we'll go to Mr. Kellaway. Mr. Kellaway, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Chair and Minister. Great to see you here. And to Ms. Lloyd and Mr. Bilodeau, thank you also for being here. I have a couple of questions, but I'll start with Ms. Lloyd. Does the procurement of these vessels pose a national security threat to Canada? I just want to be clear in terms of the answer. Yes, no? From your perspective, from your expertise, where you work, and Mr. Bilodeau, I'll ask you to chime in as well. To be clear with Canadians, from your perspective, from your intelligence, from your work, can you talk to us about the yes, no, in terms does it pose that threat to Canadian citizens?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question and the opportunity to give a clearer response. So not having reviewed the procurement and not being in a position to understand the technologies that will be on the actual vessels, because that has not been our role so far, my current understanding is that there are no national security threats that would raise concern in terms of these are not connected vessels, and they do not pose the types of things that we would be concerned about in terms of data sovereignty, for example, or private information that could be collected through the use of those ferries of Canadian citizens. So at this point, there is nothing to flag to the committee.
Okay, so that's a no. Mr. Bilodeau, would you like to chime in, sir?
The only thing I would add is that there is legislation before Parliament on protecting critical infrastructure in federally regulated infrastructure, for example, in transport, that would require those operators to have certain protections in place, and so that's a piece of legislation that would help in supporting the protection from a cyber perspective.
Okay. Thank you very much, both of you, for answering that question very succinctly for those in the room and those watching at home. Minister, I want to go to you next. Given that the CIB operates at arm's length and reports to, I believe, the infrastructure minister, I wonder if you can confirm if public safety, that it doesn't direct its lending decisions. I think this is important in terms of making the distinction in terms of the divisions of powers in terms of province and feds.
It does not. But what I do want to just offer, Mr. Callaway, is that we are quite involved with the Major Projects Office, and I think it'll be instructive for this community to understand a bit more of that work, and maybe I can ask Mr. Bilodeau to kind of elaborate on what we're doing with the Major Projects Office.
Thank you, Minister. Yes, the Major Projects Office obviously has a number of projects that it's considering or that might consider in the future. Part of the legislation includes a national security review. We have been supporting, along with our partners at CSIS, RCMP, CSC, and others, conducting reviews of some of the projects and informing or providing advice on national security concerns and feeding in that into the decision making.
Thank you again for another succinct answer. Minister, going back to you now. I'm wondering, do you think that conflating provincial procurement decisions with national security authorities, it runs the risk of confusion about the scope of Canadian law?
Well, I would suggest that for the federal government to be involved in procurement decisions, I think can cause a great deal of turbulence amongst our federation. Provinces have their own policies in place. They have their own systems in place. They are subject to regulation if their vessels are regulated by the federal government, so they are subject to regulation. However, with respect to security review, that is not something that is now within any of the provincial or territorial mandates or processes.
Thank you, and I have less than a minute left. So I'm going to take this time for one last question. And it goes back to you again, Minister. Would you agree that effective national security policy requires steady and evidence-based leadership grounded in law rather than reactionary decision-making?
Absolutely. And look, I think we've learned a lot from the Investment Canada Act process in terms of how to undertake these decisions. It's based on the available evidence, based on interviews, based on other research, and we have a robust system in place when it comes to federal investments that are subject to the Investment Canada Act.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Kellaway, and thank you, Minister. And on behalf of all members of this committee, I would like to thank you as well as your officials for your time today and your testimony on this very important study. Colleagues, we're going to suspend for a couple minutes as we set up for the next round of witnesses. The meeting is suspended to the call of the chair.